House will be in order. All those not having privileges to the floor will please vacate the chamber. Members and guests will please rise as we are led in prayer today by the gentleman from the 50th Delegate Ward.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Please bow your heads and join me in prayer. Eternal God, we praise your holy name. Your prophet Isaiah called you wonderful, Counselor, the mighty God, the everlasting Father, the Prince of Peace. You're all these and much more. Isaiah also said in that same verse that the government shall be upon your shoulder. What government was he speaking of? He was speaking of a future government when Christ will rule in a new kingdom. But for now, we have man-made government, which is not perfect. That is why we pray to you each day in this chamber. It's because we need your help and guidance. We thank you for all the blessings that you bestowed on us. Continue to bless the great state of West Virginia and all its inhabitants. Bless our military personnel around the world. Keep them out of harm's way. Give each one strength, grace, wisdom, courage. And may there be love for you and love for one another here in this chamber. Because as the great apostle Paul wrote, love never fails. Look now upon this assembly, fill us with the spirit of wisdom and understanding. May each decision be according to your will and be pleasing unto you. In the name of your Son, Jesus Christ, we ask and pray all these things. Amen.
Amen. Members and guests will please remain standing as we're led in the Pledge of Allegiance by the lady from the 51st, Delegate Fritsch.
Will everyone in the gallery please join the members in honoring our nation's flag with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Reading the Journal.
Journal of the House of Delegates, Charleston, Friday, January 26, 2018.
Chair recognizes the gentleman from the 10th, Delegate Chris.
Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent that the further of the reading of the journals be dispensed with and that it be approved as have been read.
The gentleman from the 10th asks unanimous consent that the further reading of the journal be dispensed with and that it be approved as having been read. Is there objection? Chair hears none. Journal is approved as having been read. Gentleman from the 58th.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Ladies and gentlemen, happy Jefferson County Day. Today we have a citation presentation honoring Jefferson County. To receive the citation, we have officials and citizens from Jefferson County with us. Escorting our guests into the chamber are Delegates Espinoza, Moore, and Upson.
Clerk, please read the citation.
Whereas Jefferson County was formed from Berkeley County in 1801 and named for Thomas Jefferson, author of the Declaration of Independence and third President of the United States. And whereas Jefferson County's municipalities include Charlestown, the county seat established in 1789 by George Washington's brother Charles, Ranson, 1910, Harper's Ferry, 1851, Bolivar, 1825, and Shepherdstown, 1762. And whereas from John Brown's raid in Harper's Ferry to Johnstown, believed to be the first free black community in West Virginia, and from the Civil War battle sites to the courthouse in Charlestown, being the only courthouse in America to have held 2 trials for treason, Jefferson County is rich in history. In 1906, Storer College in Harper's Ferry was the site of the Niagara movements, later merged with the NAACP, first meeting on United States soil. The meeting was later described by W.E.B. Du Bois as one of the greatest meetings that American Negroes ever held. And whereas today, Jefferson County is an economic engine for the state of West Virginia with a booming population that has grown from 21,280 in 1970 to 53,498 after the 2010 census. And whereas Jefferson County has a vibrant tourism industry drawing hundreds of thousands of visitors from around the world each year to enjoy whitewater rafting, zip lining, camping, and hiking along the Appalachian Trail, shopping at farmers markets, or taking in the many national historical sites around the county. And whereas Jefferson County has been home to Shepherd University for 145 years, which has evolved into a thriving school of 4,000 students, 60% of which are West Virginia natives. And whereas it is fitting to recognize Jefferson County for its history, culture, economy, natural beauty, and future development in the state of West Virginia. Therefore, the House of Delegates of the West Virginia Legislature hereby recognizes Jefferson County and directs this citation be presented this 29th day of January, 2018.
Members will please be at ease a moment while I greet our guests and present the citation. John for the 48th, Doug Hamrick.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On behalf of all of the delegates from Harrison County, I'd like to welcome J.D. Luchuk in the North Gallery. He's the Manager of Finance for the West Virginia Air Service Center for Bombardier Aerospace, and he's with us today. The House will make him welcome.
John from the 10th, Doug Kelly.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Today in our Capitol is Optometry Day in the Capitol, and I'd like to welcome the doctors of optometry from all over the state of West Virginia. Doctors of optometry are currently in 52 of the 55 counties in West Virginia, and they provide a majority of the eye care to citizens of West Virginia. West Virginia optometrists have been licensed to treat eye disease like glaucoma since 1976, and I would like for all of the doctors of optometry and their staffs to please stand and be recognized.
John for the 19th, Doug Thompson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On behalf of myself and Delegate Hicks, we have several pages here from Pritchard Elementary. I'll introduce the first group. I'm not sure if they're out here yet. I think they're coming out now. But If you would please welcome them. They are Aaron Hessen, Hannah Sexton, Abby Newby, and Maddie Morris. So please give them a round of applause and welcome them.
John, for the 19th, Doggett Hicks.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In addition to the pages previously announced by fellow delegate Robbie Thompson, we have 4 more. We have Mackenzie Castle, we have Shelby Keith, Brady Ross, Braxton Zirkle, and all these students attend Pritchard Elementary. Would the House make them a hearty and warm welcome?
John, from 29th, Doggett Moy.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On behalf of all the delegates that represent Raleigh County, we have with us today David Holliday. He's here for Optometry Day. He is an optometrist in Raleigh County, and he is also an avid car lover. Is very active in the local car shows and antique cars. Would David please stand, and will the House please make him welcome?
Lave from 16th, Doggett Miller.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On behalf of all the delegates that represent Lincoln County, we'd like to welcome some guests from Lincoln County High School. Part of them are in the Senate, and I believe the ones that are here are Jacob Hall, Sonny Harris, Haley Humphreys, Yana Smith, and Mallory Stanley. If they're here, would they please stand up and you all make them welcome? Thank you.
Jerome from 28th, Doggett Pack.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On behalf of the delegates representing Raleigh County, we have several pages here today. From Fairdale Elementary, we have Jaden Akerd, Matthew Hill, and McKinley Hill. From Bradley Elementary, we have Gracie Taylor, Dre Lawson, and Madison Hanna. And from Marsh Fork Elementary, down on the fine Coal River, we have Maggie Asbury, Madison Jones, and Chris Bowman. If the House will please make them welcome.
John for the night, Doggett Holland.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In the North or South Gallery, I want to introduce Dr. Mark Sonali of Mineral Wells. Dr. Mark Sonali practices in Wood County in Parkersburg at the Frames, etc. Welcome.
John for the 24th, Doggett Rodriguez.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In the South Gallery, we have Director of the West Virginia School of Personnel Association, Joe White. Would you stand up on the floor? Please make him welcome.
John from the 17th, Doggett Lovejoy.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On behalf of the Cabell delegation, we have in the North Gallery Dr. John Knight, a good friend and my personal optometrist. And on behalf of myself and Delegate Rohrbach, we have a page today from Vincent Middle School, Ms. Zoe Fornash. If Zoe's in the room, if she could stand up, and the House make both of these special guests feel welcome.
Further introductions. Reports of standing committees.
Your Committee on Judiciary has had under consideration House Bill 3020 relating to criminal penalties for the offenses of hunting, trapping, or fishing on the lands of another person, House Bill 4233 relating generally to fraudulent transfers, and House Bill 4242 clarifying the jurisdictional amount for removal of a civil action from magistrate court to circuit court. Reports back committee substitutes, therefore, with the recommendation that the committee substitutes each do pass.
Report be received. Reports to select committees. Messages from the executive. Messages from the Senate.
The clerk of the Senate announces the passage by the Senate of Senate Bill 67 exempting DNR police officers' pensions from state income tax.
Message will be received. The bill will be referred to the Committee on Pensions and Retirements and then to Finance.
The Senate has passed committee substitute for Senate Bill 116, providing court costs collected under Second Chance driver's license program are not subject to 5% offset.
Message will be received. The bill will be referred to the Committee on the Judiciary and then to Finance.
The Senate has passed Senate Bill 143, permitting DNR identification tag to be used to identify trap.
Message will be received. The bill will be referred to the Committee on Agriculture and Natural Resources and then to Judiciary.
The Senate has passed Senate Bill 311, specifying consumers' sales and service tax exemption for a purchase of certain services and tangible personal property related to aircraft.
Message will be received. The bill will be referred to the Committee on Finance.
The Senate has passed Senate Bill 351, permitting ballot commissioners serve while candidates for certain offices.
Message will be received. The bill will be referred to the Committee on the Judiciary.
The Senate has passed Committee Substitute for Senate Concurrent Resolution 4, West Virginia Army National Guard Sergeant Glenn F. Lowe, P.E., Memorial Bridge.
Message will be received. The resolution will be referred to the Committee on Roads and Transportation, then to Rules. Resolutions.
House Concurrent Resolution 34, U.S. Army Private First Class Glenn S. Perdue, U.S. Army Tech 5 Charlie H. Perdue, and U.S. Army Air Corps Sergeant Carl C. Perdue Memorial Road.
Resolution will be referred to the Committee on Roads and Transportation, then to Rules. Petitions. Motions. Bills introduced.
House Bill 4338, relating to the powers and authority of the Divisions of Administrative Services and Corrections and Rehabilitation of the Department of Military Affairs and Public Safety.
Gentleman from the 58th.
Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent that further reading of bills introduced be dispensed with, and each bill be considered formally introduced and referred to the appropriate committee as listed on the Chamber Automation System.
The gentleman from the 58th asks unanimous consent that further reading of bills introduced be dispensed with. Each bill be considered formally introduced and referred to the appropriate committees as indicated on the Chamber Automation System. Is there objection? The chair hears none. Each bill be considered formally introduced and so referred. Unfinished business. Bills on third reading.
Committee substitute for House Bill 2546, allowing replacement costs of employer-provided property to be deducted from an employee's final paycheck if the property is not returned.
Request for the House is the passage of the bill. The gentleman from the 27th, Delegate Schott, to explain the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and good morning. In this country, freedom of contract has always been considered a cornerstone of our free market libertarianism. But unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on your view of things, that concept has eroded over time, and in many cases, courts have recognized under the police power the right of a state to rein that in, so to speak. In other words, freedom of contract basically proceeds under the assumption that each of us is free to enter into voluntarily an agreement with another as to what rules will govern our conduct. One of the areas in which states have dealt with this issue has been in the area of labor relations. We have minimum wage laws, we have wage and hour laws. Here in West Virginia, one of the laws that this legislature has adopted is what's called the Wage Payment Act. If you look back, you'll see as early as 1917, there was a predecessor to this act. So it's been with us for 100+ years, and the purpose basically was it was designed to assist workers in collecting compensation that was due to them and wrongfully withheld. We've had this bill before us before with some modifications, but basically the way that the bill operates is that every employer is to pay his or her employee at least twice a month with no more than 19 days between payments. Upon the termination, whether by discharge or resignation or just leaving and not returning, an employee must be paid his final compensation on or before the last payday. Now, the failure to do that triggers some pretty serious consequences. It can be enforced by both the Department of Labor, the Commissioner of the Department of Labor, or by the individual through a lawsuit. And if the individual prevails and proves that their wages were not properly paid to them upon time, their compensation, then that employee would receive not only that compensation, but 2 times that as liquidated damages. And in addition to that, any costs and attorney's fees that would be involved in pursuing that. What you have before you today is a very limited modification of the Wage Payment Act that deals with those situations in which an employer provides to his or her employee certain property that the employee owns. It can be, we had testimony in Industry and Labor of a $2,000 laser, L-A-Z-E-R, that was a pretty high-tech piece of equipment. It can be a phone, it can be a uniform, it can be an iPad, anything of that sort. What this provision allows is for the employer to deduct from the last payday after that employee is either discharged or leaves, quits, resigns, the replacement cost of that equipment if the employee fails to return it. Now, there's a requirement in order to exercise that option. It's not automatic. In other words, the employee has to affirmatively act in a way in which he produces a written agreement for the employee to sign. The written agreement has to describe with specificity what the employer provided property is. It has to provide what the replacement cost is to put the employee on notice, and in some fashion highlight the severity of the penalty if the employee does not take care of that particular piece of equipment. And it has to be signed by the employee. Then upon the resignation or termination of that employee's employment, that equipment, if it's returned, there's no further consequence, and the employee must be paid that final paycheck within the terms of the law, in other words, on or before the last payday. If, however, the property is not returned, then the employer has the opportunity, it's an option once again, to withhold that amount that's described in the written agreement which the employee has signed off on until that employee is returned. The employer also has to notify the employee by a writing, certified mail, that the employer is intending to retain that amount of the money. In other words, let's suppose it's $300 and the final paycheck is $1,500, then the employer can only hold the $300, but would have to notify the employee that he is withholding that amount and give the employee another 10 days to return the property. If the property is returned, then the balance of that amount that's being held by the employer is returned to the employee at that time. If the employee objects to what the employer proposes to take out, then the employee must notify the employer, and that money is then transferred into an interest-bearing account until that issue is resolved. Now, we had this bill before us last year, and it passed out of here. There have been some changes to the bill that those of you who were here last year may remember, and let me highlight those changes because I think they're significant changes and were the result of some issues that were raised not only during our discussion here last year, but also in the committees that passed this bill out, Industry and Labor and Judiciary. Number one, there is a minimum threshold that must be met of $100. In other words, the employee can't penalize the employee or try to hold money for a stapler or a minor item. It has to at least exceed $100 before this provision is triggered. Also accepted from the operation of this statute is any collective bargaining agreement. In other words, if you're an employee subject to a collective bargaining agreement, this does not apply to you. It only applies to those employers and employees without a collective bargaining agreement. With regard to uniforms, if the uniform is returned within 3 years of its issuance, regardless of its condition, it is accepted regardless of that condition. And the other issue deals with replacement tools, which is a situation in which the employee may bring a tool of his or her own to the job in order to be able to perform the job. If that tool is lost or destroyed or somehow rendered inoperable, and the employer provides a substitute, then the employee is under no obligation to return that substitute because it, in essence, is a replacement of the tool that the employee brought with him or her at the time they came and took that position. Obviously, if the employer is in, and there's a contest with regard to the amount withheld and the employer loses, then the employer is subject to the same penalties under the Act that he or she would be if they failed to pay those wages. In other words, the amount in controversy would be due to the employee, plus 2 times that amount is liquidated damages, plus attorney's fees and costs. I believe that adequately summarizes the bill, and Mr. Speaker, I urge passage.
Are there other members desiring to speak to the passage of the bill? Gentleman from the 50th, Delegate Caputo. Gentleman yields.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Chairman, I just want to clarify a couple things on replacement cost. If an employee's issued, let's say, an iPhone, and that iPhone is valued at $800 when he was issued, and he uses that phone for 5 or 6 years and doesn't return it, the full replacement cost would apply? There's no depreciation applied to that piece of equipment?
Short answer is yes. The replacement, it would be whatever was put into the original agreement that the employee agreed to. And of course, keep in mind that the purpose of the bill is that the person that replaces that employee has to have that same item in order to perform the job for the employer. So the employer is going to have to replace it. Whether the phone costs more, I think new iPhones are more now than the old ones, but they have to have, if you can go out and buy the same model year, yes, you would. But the key is to provide the employer with the opportunity to have an employee who's possessed of the same equipment and can do the job that employee who left was.
But even if the employer would have depreciated that piece of property over the years through his taxes and tax forms, the employee would still be required to pay the full replacement price.
Right, and if that employee had depreciated, or that employer had depreciated that, it's off his books or partly off his books, then he'd have to report depreciation recapture on his tax return in the year that money was put in. In other words, if you wrote off $300 of the, what'd you say, $800, then in the year in which the employee paid that back, the employer would be required to report that as income under the concept of depreciation recapture on that year's, not by amending his prior return, but on the year in which that occurred.
So the same principle would apply to uniforms. If they were 5 or 6 years old, tattered and torn, if they didn't get back, they would have to pay the actual replacement cost of that uniform.
Assuming they wanted to hang on to it, yes, they would. The simple thing would be to bring back that tattered uniform in the shape it's in.
Yeah, I agree, and I'm not saying that this property shouldn't be returned. I just have an issue about the value of it if it isn't. And another question: if the employee disagrees with the value of a piece of equipment, what vehicle does he or she have to arbitrate that issue?
Generally speaking, now that we've raised the magistrate court jurisdiction to $7,500, as long as it was under $7,500 in issue, the employee could go to magistrate court, not required to have an attorney. It's in essence a small claims court, and litigate it there. And if the employee won, then of course those penalties would be triggered. The employer would have to pay not only the amount in question, but twice that for liquidated damages, plus any attorney's fees if the employee decided to get an attorney, which wouldn't be necessary in magistrate court.
So the cause of action would have to be triggered by the employee now. I guess before, if a piece of equipment was taken or not returned or whatever, the employer would have to take the action to try to get it back. Now it is basically the employer can withhold the pay, and if the employee disagrees, then he or she has to take the action to court.
That's correct, yes.
And you say you believe, well, let me ask you, what if the value of the equipment was more than the individual's last paycheck?
I think the only amount that could be withheld is whatever the paycheck was. And if the employer decided to pursue the difference, then he or she would have to go to magistrate court or wherever would be appropriate to pursue that.
And I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but the final determination of the cost of that piece of equipment is unilaterally decided by the employer. The employer says what the replacement cost is, withholds that from the employee's paycheck, and if the employee doesn't like that, he or she has to go to court.
The decision of the value would be made at the time the employer presented the agreement to the employee, because it would have to be spelled out in that document. The employer could not withhold any more than the amount that the employee agreed was the replacement cost for that that item. Now, the employer could agree to less if he wanted to, but the value would be set when the agreement was signed by both parties.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Other members desiring to speak to the passage of the bill? Gentleman from the 27th wish to close debate. Not the question for the House is the passage of the bill. Those in favor of passage will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no. The clerk will prepare the machine. Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the result. On this question, 61 ayes, 35 nays, 3 members absent not voting. Majority of members present having voted in the affirmative, I declare the bill passed. Clerk, please report the title.
Committee substitute for House Bill 2546.
Are there amendments to the title? If not, the title is read by the clerk will be and remain the title of the bill. Clerk, please communicate the acts of the House to the Senate and request concurrence therein. Further bills on third reading.
House Bill 4183 relating generally to standardized testing requirements for non-public schools.
Question for the House is the passage of the bill. The gentleman from the 66th, Delegate Espinosa, to explain the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This bill is a general update of the provisions for annual summative assessments for private, parochial, and church schools, or schools of a religious order who operate under Exemption K. The bill replaces the current list of 4 specifically named tests that must be used with the more generic nationally normed standardized achievement test. It also reduces the amount of testing to only those in grade levels, subject areas, and students required in the public schools, and strikes the requirement to test every child between the ages of 7 and 16 years in the subjects of English, grammar, reading, social studies, science, and mathematics. In sum, the bill, similar to one that the House passed last year, cuts required testing in half to match the requirement for public school students, and gives these schools more latitude in selecting the tests they want to use. Mr. Speaker, I urge passage.
Are there other members desiring to speak to the passage of the bill? If not, the question for the House is the passage of the bill. Those in favor of passage will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no. The clerk will prepare the machine. Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the result. On this question, 96 ayes, 0 nays, 3 members absent not voting. Majority of members present having voted in the affirmative, I declare the bill passed. Clerk, please report the title.
House Bill 4183.
Are there amendments to the title? If not, the title is read by the clerk will be and remain the title of the bill. Clerk, please communicate the action of the House to the Senate and request concurrence therein. Bills on second reading.
Committee substitute for House Bill 2799, prohibiting the superintendent of schools from requiring a physical examination to be included to the application for a minor's work permit.
Are there amendments? Not to be engrossed and advanced to third reading.
House Bill 4010, providing no requirement to perform or host a marriage ceremony that does not conform to sincerely held religious beliefs.
Are there amendments? Not to be engrossed and advanced to third reading. Bills on first reading.
Committee substitute for House Bill 2831, relating to the reconstitution of the Driver's Licensing Advisory Board.
Bill be advanced.
Committee substitute for House Bill 4006, revising the processes through which professional development is delivered to those who provide public education.
Bill be advanced. Leaves of absence. Gentleman from the 58th.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Speaker. For our colleagues, delegates Eisner, Longstreth, and Storch.
Without objection, leaves will be granted. Remarks by members of the House. The gentleman from the 25th, Delegate Painter.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Before I come down here this morning, I had the pleasure of attending 2 rallies with parents and teachers in Wyoming County. There was probably 50 to 100 people at each one, and I don't think a lot of people understand just how much anger there is out there over PEIA right now. It's going to get worse. You can see it coming, but just talking to them, that is their #1 concern. And we've all heard the Economic Development Office and Save Our State Fund and extra money the governor's put in for that. And yeah, tourism is important, but wouldn't you think before we want people to come here, we would be better off trying to get people to stay here? But that's just something for you folks to think about, and this is a snowball and it's going to get bigger. And we need to be addressing this issue, and they sent that message with me loud and clear this morning. Thank you.
John for the 50th, Delegate Caputo.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I want to talk a little bit about an experience I had last night. We talked last week, and I know we debated the film tax credit bill last week. It was a good, healthy debate, and didn't like the outcome, but it was a good, healthy debate. But I mentioned on the floor that there was a movie being made in my hometown, and it was pretty exciting, and I haven't seen life in that town for a long time. But anyway, last night they had what they called a wrap party to wrap up production. The production was over, and we have a new brewery in Reevesville, so they had it there. And they invited me and the mayor to come down and meet all the cast and the crew. And it was a really, really exciting experience. There were stars there that some of you may have heard of, some of you may not. Madison Eisman from Jumanji. Josh Stewart, who played in Criminal Minds and First Watch, a Webster County native, was there. Skylar Gisondo from Vacation was there. And Joe Pantalinio from The Sopranos was there. So it was a pretty exciting moment, especially that Sopranos part. But it was really exciting. But the point I want to make, Mr. Speaker and ladies and gentlemen, there was over 225 to 250 people at that party last night. And the only people that wasn't involved with the production of that movie was myself, the mayor, and the staff working at the brewery. And it just brought to light to me how much money has came into that community and surrounding communities. They were staying in hotels in Fairmont. They were staying in hotels in Morgantown. I don't know how many, I think they had over 500 or 600 hotel nights total that they paid for that production. They had old cars there that they had rented for that production. They had actually moved people out of their homes in my community and give them housing because they wanted to shoot the film in these homes, so they had to pay for all of that. It was just phenomenal to me, the money that was spent in Marion County and surrounding counties with this movie. And all the wages that was paid, it was just incredible. And I wanted to share that with this body today because, you know, when I talked to the staff and the producers of that movie, every one of them was in tune with what we done with that film tax credit. Every one of them was in tune with that. And they come up to me and said, "Are you crazy? Why would you do this? We understand you can't attract the big guy, you know, the big movie guy, but the little production company like ours, this was everything to us. It meant the world to us to come back home to West Virginia and do that. This tax credit was a make or break for us." And I listened intently to not only the producers, but the actors. And you know what they said? Every one of them. We love West Virginia. We're coming back to West Virginia. It's a beautiful place. You guys need to do more to attract folks like us to come to West Virginia. And I couldn't agree with them more. It was phenomenal. So, you know, I just want to close by saying, you know, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Finance Chairman, if you could look, I'm sure the original language maybe wasn't perfect and people had a lot of problems with it, but I don't think it's an issue we should let die. I think we should look at this and see if there's a way that we can do something to continue to provide this. Yeah, I know we can't compete with the money that maybe Kentucky's throwing at it or New York's throwing at it, but, you know, we can do a little something, and we can try to help, and we can try to attract these small filmmakers to come to West Virginia. And I think if we don't, when we talk all the talk about tourism, you know, maybe we're not being real serious, because these folks travel all over the place and they love West Virginia and they're going to tell people to come back. And I'm sure they have friends in the industry that they would like to encourage to come here and do the same thing that they did. But, you know, now we don't have that. So just some food for thought. I appreciate you listening. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
John from 23rd, Doug Miller.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Just a point of clarification that I want to make to the body, that even though that there are several of us in the chamber today that are wearing blue in support of state workers and public employees, even though that my daughter, who is a grad student at the University of Kentucky, may appreciate, this is not indicative of the results of the basketball game that took place in Morgantown this past Saturday night. This is in support of our employees and our workers. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
John from the 22nd, Doggett Eldridge.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I got to read a few emails this past weekend, and got a lot of phone calls about our power bills. These people are really hurting out there. They're sending me messages that their power bill is $600, $700, $800 a month when they're only getting $700 a month to live on. They said, well, you've got to be able to do something at the Capitol about this. And I said, well, the PSC is kind of in control of this. I really can't do anything. I said, however, I said, you send messages to me and I will get up on the floor and raise a little cane about it. Now, whether these meters are being read or whether these meters are being driven by and assessed that way, I'm not sure. But I do know a lot of people are hurting out there right now on their power bill. And it's just, we have 2 more months of probably good cold weather. So please put in your prayers these elderly people that's got large power bills, that they survive this winter. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
John from 27th, Doug Gerhardt.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm always happy when my friend from Marion County rises to speak, and when he did today, it reminded me of something. Last week, here in the House chamber, we honored the state champion Bluefield Beavers AA football team. And the delegate mentioned the fact that he was unhappy about a vote, and he wasn't present when they were here, and I only want to query whether or not he was unhappy about the results of the last victory achieved by that state championship football team. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Somehow I knew you wanted to respond to that. Gentleman from the 50th, Doug Caputo.
My hat's off to the kids from Bluefield. They did a wonderful job, but we did a wonderful job too, and I'm proud of those folks. We hadn't been there at the big dance for a long time, but I appreciate you reminding me of that, Delegate. I'd forgotten about that until you brought it to my attention again today. Thank you.
John for the 50th, Delegate Ward.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. Without objection, I ask that my colleague from the 50th remarks be printed in the appendix of the journal.
Without objection, remarks be printed in the appendix of the journal. Further remarks by members. Miscellaneous business. Gentleman from the 58th.
Mr. Speaker, subject to announcements, I move the House stand adjourned until 11 a.m. tomorrow.
Other announcements. Gentleman from the 64th, Doggett Householder.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Committee on Finance will meet today at 2 p.m. for a budget hearing by the Department of Transportation.
Gentleman from the 33rd, Doggett Hanshaw.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Judiciary Committee will resume our posted agenda upstairs at 2 o'clock. Thank you.
Gentleman from the 51st, Doggett Statler.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Your Committee on Education will meet today at 2 p.m. in the Education Committee room. The agenda is posted.
Gentleman from the 48th, Doggett Hamrick.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As a reminder, your Committee on Roads and Transportation will meet today in the House Government Organization Committee Room 215E at 1 p.m. The agenda is posted. Also a reminder, Republican members of the committee will caucus in the chairman's office at 12:45. Also, Mr. Speaker, your Committee on Government Organization will meet today at 3 p.m. in the House Government Organization Committee Room. The agenda for that is posted as well.
Lady from the 49th, Doggett Summers.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Your Committee on Health and Human Resources will meet tomorrow at 2 o'clock in room 215E. The agenda is posted. The Republican members will caucus at 1:30 tomorrow in the chairman's office.
The gentleman from the 42nd, Doggett Amber.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Your Committee on Agriculture and Natural Resources will meet tomorrow morning in the House Gov Org room at 8:30. At 8:30. Thank you.
Gentleman from 39th, Doggett Walters.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Your Committee on Pensions and Retirement will meet Tuesday, January 30th at 4 o'clock in the House Finance Committee room. The agenda is already posted.
John from the 22nd, Doggett Maynard.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Your Committee on Volunteer Fire Department and EMS will meet in the Government Organization Room at 4 p.m. The agenda is posted.
John for the 67th, Delegate Moore.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Just a quick point for you all. Jefferson County Day, we're going to be hosting lunch right outside of the chamber directly after this, so feel free to come by and grab something to eat. Thank you.
John for the 15th, Delegate Foster.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Your Committee on Industry and Labor will meet tomorrow at 10 a.m. in the House GovOrg Committee Room, and the agenda will be posted.
John for the 24th, Delegate Phillips.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Co-caucus is meeting following floor session, and we also have food too. Thank you.
John for the 8th, Delegate Anderson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Energy Committee will meet at 2 p.m. tomorrow afternoon in House Judiciary. The agenda is posted. Thank you.
Further announcements. Not the question for the House is the motion by the gentleman from the 58th that the House stand adjourned until 11 a.m. tomorrow. All in favor will say aye. Those opposed, no. As appear to have it, the ayes do have it. Declare the House adjourned until 11 a.m. tomorrow.
Senate will please come to order. The Senate will please come to order. All those not having privileges of the floor will please vacate the chamber. With those on the floor and our guests in the gallery, please rise as we are led in prayer this morning by Father Matthew Moore of the St. John's Greek Orthodox Church in Charleston, West Virginia. And then please remain standing as we are led in the pledge this morning by the Senator from Jefferson. Father Moore.
O Heavenly King, Comforter, Spirit of truth, present everywhere and filling all things, treasury of blessings and giver of life, come and abide in us and save our souls, O good one. Christ our God, bless the men and women here, the senators, the clerks, the support staff, all who work for the betterment of our state. Be in their hearts, minds, and mouths as they engage in discussion, that they will find solutions that will lift up the downtrodden, give hope to the weary, and protect the vulnerable. We ask this through your Father, who is without beginning, your all-holy, good, and life-creating Spirit, now and forever and always. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Pat. The Senator from Jefferson.
Would the senators and the guests in the gallery please join us in saying the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Reading of the Journal.
West Virginia Legislature Senate Journal, January 26, 2018. The Senate met at 11:10 a.m.
The Senator from Nicholas requests unanimous consent that further reading of the Journal be dispensed with and that it be approved as having been read. Is there objection? Chair hears none, so ordered. Introduction of guest. On behalf of the Senate, it is my pleasure to welcome our honorary pages for the day. Please stand and be recognized as your name is called. As guest of the junior senator from the 8th, we have Austin Goldieson, I think I said that correctly, Chloe Lafferty. As guest of the senator from Boone, we have George Erling. And as guest as the senator from Jefferson, we have Andrew Beatty and the daughter of the senator from Jefferson, Teresa Rucker. And as guest as the senator from Wood, we have Madison Jones and Madeline Tester. If they would all please rise and the Senate give them a warm welcome. Further introductions? Further introductions. The junior senator or the senior senator from the 6th.
Thank you, Mr. President. There are 15 plus members of the West Virginia Association of Optometric Physicians, including Laura Supay, representing the optometrists from all over the state here today. Optometrists are the primary eye care physicians and are present in 52 of 55 counties. In 2018, the association is celebrating the 110th anniversary of optometry in the state. Senate, please join me and make them welcome. Stand up.
Further introductions, the senator from Cabell County.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Thank you. I'll speak louder. How about this?
excuse the pun, but my eyesight's not that great, but I see my eye doctor up there, Dr. Ratliff. Would you please stand and be recognized? Thank you.
Further introductions? Further introductions? The senator from Marshall County.
Thank you, Mr. President. There's a group from the National Federation of Independent Businesses in the North Gallery. The NFIB members, they have about 2,000 members in West Virginia. 99% of West Virginia businesses are small. The members that are here from the NFIB in the North Gallery include Sharon Sykes, Bob Headley, George Montgomery, Jenny Gallion, and Christian Marsh. If they'd all just stand and the Senate make them welcome. Thank you.
The junior senator from the 8th.
Thank you, Mr. President. I have two announcements today. The first one is today is Optometry Day, and in the gallery we have today my eye doctor, Dr. Rebecca St. Jean. I welcome her to stand, and everyone give her a warm welcome. Also, Mr. President, from the senior senator from the 8th, on his behalf and my behalf, we have 2 pages today, Chloe Lafferty and Austin Goldeisen, and they are here today with their mothers, and they are in the gallery also. We have Judy Lafferty and Jennifer Goldeisen. I ask that they stand and the Senate make them welcome.
Further introductions, the senator from Wetzel County.
Thank you, Mr. President. I know he was introduced as a group, but I want to give a special welcome to a very close friend of mine and a great neighbor, Dr. Neil Marshall from New Martinsfield. Please make him welcome.
Further introductions? Further introductions. Communications from the House.
The Clerk of the House announced the passage by that body of engrossed committee substitute for House Bill 2483, requiring Division of Juvenile Services to transfer to a correctional facility or regional jail any juvenile in its custody that has been transferred to adult jurisdiction of the Circuit Court and who reaches his or her 18th birthday.
Message be received and referred to the Committee on the Judiciary.
Engrossed committee substitute for House Bill 4035, creating a legislative coalition to study and report to the legislature on palliative care.
Message will be received and referred to the Committee on Health and Human Resources and then on to the Committee on Judiciary.
Engrossed committee substitute for House Bill 4135, updating the meaning of federal taxable income and certain other terms used in the West Virginia Corporation Net Income Tax Act.
Message be received and referred to the Committee on Finance.
Engrossed House Bill 4146, updating meaning of federal adjusted gross income and certain other terms used in the West Virginia Personal Income Tax Act.
Message be received and referred to the Committee on Finance.
Engrossed committee substitute for House Bill 4169, requiring certain establishments and facilities to post human trafficking assistance notices.
Message be received and referred to the Committee on the Judiciary.
Engrossed committee substitute for House Bill 4174, designating the placement of nonpartisan judicial offices on the primary election ballot.
Message be received and referred to the Committee on the Judiciary. Further communications from the House?
No, sir.
Communications from the Executive?
There are none.
Reports from standing committees?
Your Committee on Finance has had under consideration Senate Bill 336, providing certain DMV applicants ability to contribute to West Virginia Department of Veterans Assistance, and reports back a committee substitute for same, with the recommendation that the committee substitute do pass. Respectfully submitted, Craig Blair, Chair.
Report will be received.
That's all I have, sir.
From select committees?
There are none.
Introduction of bills. The senator from Ohio County.
Thank you, Mr. President. I request unanimous consent that Senate Bill number 407 through Senate Bill number 415 be considered and introduced, read by their titles, and referred to the appropriate committees as shown on the chamber automation system.
The senator from Ohio requests unanimous consent that Senate Bill number 407 through Senate Bill number 415 be considered introduced, read by their titles, and referred to the appropriate committees as shown on the chamber automation system. Is there objection? Chair hears none, so ordered. Resolutions.
Senate Resolution 19 by Senators Rucker, Unger, and Plymel designating January 29th, 2018 as Jefferson County Day.
The senator from Jefferson County.
Mr. President, I request unanimous consent that the resolution be taken up for immediate consideration, committee reference be dispensed with, and the resolution be put upon its adoption.
Is there objection? Chair hears none, so ordered. The clerk will read the resolution.
Senate Resolution 19 designating January 29th, 2018 as Jefferson County Day at the Capitol.
Question before the Senate is adoption of the resolution. Is there discussion? The senator from Jefferson County.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'm just very excited today because Jefferson County Day is a day in which the county that's the furthest away from where we are is able to come here and tell you all of the wonderful advantages that we have there in the Eastern Panhandle. It is literally the doorway to Maryland and Virginia, and we are just growing, thankfully, because of the wonderful work that our county does, the Development Authority, the Chamber. It is really a wonderful thing to represent Jefferson County. I'm right at the very tip on the mountain where we have just recently had a study done because there is a lot of trouble with the cliff there, rocks falling on the road. I'm looking forward to hearing a report from that study done. But I just urge you all to please come out, get to know these folks. They're working really hard, and a lot of Jefferson County the state, and it is one of the issues that we have to deal with, that we need to get them involved in our communities and would love to be able to bring more jobs so that they can be with their families more. Thank you very much, and I urge adoption of the resolution.
Further discussion? Further discussion? Not, all those in favor of the resolution will say aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it. I declare the resolution adopted. The senator from Ohio County.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move the Senate stand in brief recess for the purpose of presenting the resolution.
Senator from Ohio moves that the Senate stand in brief recess for the purpose of presenting this resolution. All those in favor will say aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it. I declare the Senate in brief recess to present this resolution. Senate will please come to order. Senate will please come to order. Further resolutions?
No, sir.
Motions? Petitions?
There are none.
Unfinished business.
Senate Concurrent Resolution 9, urging Congress call Convention of States under Article 5 limited to proposing amendments to Constitution of United States.
Resolution will be referred to the Committee on the Judiciary.
Senate Concurrent Resolution 10, proposing amendment to U.S. Constitution restoring free and fair elections.
Resolution will be referred to the Committee on the Judiciary. Further resolutions or further unfinished business?
No, sir.
Bills on third reading.
Engrossed committee substitute for Senate Bill 7 relating to claims under Wage Payment and Collection Act. Third reading of the bill.
The question before the Senate is, shall the bill pass? Is there discussion? The senator from Morgan County.
Thank you, Mr. President. The committee substitute for Senate Bill 7 amends two sections of the code. They're both in the Wage Payment Collection Act, Chapter 21, Article 5, and the affected sections are Section 1 and Section 12. Section 1 is just definitional. The substance of the bill is contained in the amendments to Section 12. So this is sort of modeled after a bill that we passed last year relating to pre-suit notices in the context of claims under the West Virginia Consumer Credit and Protection Act. And what this bill does is its design is to provide an expeditious method for resolution of claims without the need to file a gotcha lawsuit that's going to run up a bunch of attorney's fees and liquidated damages. So what it does is it says that before a suit for unpaid accrued fringe benefits can be commenced, the employee has to give the employer notice, written notice. It says the alleged violation, the factual basis for the violation, including a good faith estimate of the amount of the claim, in writing by certified mail. Employer has 10 days to make a response and make a cure offer. And if the employer makes a cure offer that's acceptable to the employee, then it's a done affair. The parties can settle their claim. If the employee has 10 days once he or she receives a cure offer to accept it, otherwise it's deemed to be withdrawn. And so if the cure offer is accepted, unless otherwise agreed, the employer has 7 days to make a settlement. It provides that nothing prevents an employee who's accepted a cure offer from bringing an action to enforce it if the employer defaults upon an accepted cure offer. We've told the statute of limitations in this for the commencement of the action by 20 days to allow for this notice and right to cure to occur before suit has to be filed. It says the employer's got to notify his employees of this written notice requirement, and that's a jurisdictional prerequisite to actions brought under the Act. And so it doesn't require an employee to accept an employer's cure offer, but what it says is if the employee doesn't accept it and the case goes to a civil action, then the employer can't be charged with the employee's attorney's fees or liquidated damages if the plaintiff in that case would be the employee, presumably, rejected the employer's cure offer and the award is not more than 105% of the amount offered. So be happy to try to answer questions, Mr. President. Otherwise, I urge passage of the bill.
Further discussion? If not, all those in favor will vote yea. Those opposed will vote nay. The clerk will prepare the machine. Has every member voted? Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the results. On this question, there being 33 yeas, 0 nays, 1 absent and not voting, more than a majority of those present and voting having voted in the affirmative, I declare the bill passed. The clerk will communicate the action of the Senate to the House.
Engrossed committee substitute for Senate Bill 51 relating to domestic relations. Third reading of the bill.
The question before the Senate is, shall the bill pass? Is there discussion? The senator from Morgan County.
Thank you, Mr. President. The committee substitute for Senate Bill 51 amends a few sections in the Domestic Relation Code. It would amend and reenact Section 301 of Article 6 and amend and reenact two sections in Article 9, Sections 205 and 206, relating to domestic relations. The first section that would be amended addresses some linguistic and stylistic changes in that section of the code, which addresses factors that a court to be considered by the court in awarding spousal support. And actually, the main part of that amendment is to amend the short title of the section title. The main changes that would be affected by this bill if it becomes law are in sections 206, 205, and 205 and 209 of Article 9. In section 205, the change there is that it takes away the presumption that a court should start and make custodial allocation based on the arrangement that existed during the 24-month period preceding the filing of a suit. That's a change from current law. In section 206, there are some changes with respect to the allocation of custody. Again, the language that's stricken in that is the language that requires the starting point to be the approximate proportion of time that each parent spent performing caretaking functions prior to the parties' separation. And there's a new subdivision 9 added, which requires the court to consider, in allocating custody, a new factor, and it's a requirement that the court consider which parent will encourage and accept a positive relationship between the child and the other parent, including which parent is more likely to keep the other parent included in the child's life and activities. We also make a change in here with respect to the accommodation of the preferences of a child who's 14 years old or older. Under the current law, courts are required to consider the wishes of a 14-year-old child as to which parent he or she wants to live with. This doesn't eliminate the requirement that the court consider that, but we've added some new language, and the new language is a clause that says if the court determines it is in the best interest of the child, then the court can consider an allocation plan to accommodate the firm and reasonable preferences of a child who's 14 years of age or older. So there is some disparity from circuit to circuit in how that's interpreted. Some family court judges view the law now as saying that when a child is 14, he or she gets to call the shots. And so this is an attempt, this addition of this language, which says if the court determines it is in the best interest of the child, to add an element of judicial discretion to that. I'd be happy to try to answer any questions, Mr. President. Otherwise, I urge passage.
Further discussion? Not. All those in favor will vote yea. Those opposed will vote nay. The clerk will prepare the machine. Has every member voted? Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the results. On this question, there being 33 yeas, 0 nays, 1 absent and not voting, more than a majority of those present and voting having voted in the affirmative, I declare the bill passed. Clerk will communicate the action of the Senate to the House.
Engrossed committee substitute for Senate Bill 163, authorizing DEP promulgate legislative rules.
The Senator from Ohio County.
Thank you, Mr. President. Requesting unanimous consent that bill lie over 1 day, retaining its place on the calendar.
Is there objection? Chair hears none, so ordered.
Engrossed Senate Bill 280, allowing emergency management and operations vehicles to use red flashing warning lights. Third reading of the bill.
Question for the Senate is, shall the bill pass? Is there discussion? The senior senator from the 8th.
Thank you, Mr. President. This bill comes to the floor from the Government Organization Committee. recommended unanimously by that group. The purpose of this bill is to create one more exemption for vehicles that may use red flashing warning lights. Currently under Section 17 of the code, ambulances, firefighting vehicles, hazmat vehicles, industrial fire brigade vehicles, rescue squad vehicles, school buses are all exempt. This bill would allow emergency management and operations vehicles operated by airports to that list. It's recommended also by the Central West Virginia Airport Manager, the Yeager Airport Manager, and the Tri-State Airport Manager. All have given their support to this bill. Happy to answer questions. Urge passage.
Further discussion? Further discussion? If not, all those in favor will vote yea. Those opposed will vote nay. The clerk will prepare the machine. Has every member voted? Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the results. On this question, there being 33 yeas, 0 nays, 1 absent and not voting, more than a majority of those present and voting having voted in the affirmative, I declare the bill passed. Clerk will communicate the action of the Senate to the House. Further bills on third reading?
No, sir.
Bills on second reading?
Committee substitute for Senate Bill 165, authorizing DHHR promulgate legislative rules. Second reading of the bill.
Are there amendments to the bill?
No, sir.
If not, the bill will be engrossed and advanced to third reading.
Committee substitute for Senate Bill 284, increasing access to career education and workforce training. Second reading of the bill.
Are there amendments to the bill?
No, sir.
If not, the bill will be engrossed and advanced to third reading.
Committee substitute for Senate Bill 285, establishing regional recreation authorities and areas. Second reading of the bill.
Are there amendments to the bill?
Yes, sir. Senator Maynard moved to amend the bill on page 4.
The senior senator from the 6th.
Thank you, Mr. President. I request unanimous consent to explain the amendment in lieu of having it read.
Is there objection? Chair hears none. The senator may proceed.
This amendment simply makes the bill consistent with language passed by the Senate last year and incorporates language from the bill the Senate passed last week to prevent a code conflict between the two. Also, it would make certain regulations pertaining the conduct on the new recreation areas and those in the Hatfield-McCoy system are more consistent regarding restrictions on movement and allowing non-intoxicating beer in the areas.
Is there discussion? Further discussion? Not. The question before the Senate is adoption of the amendments offered by the senior senator from the 6th, and that all amendments be considered as one. All those in favor will vote or say yeah, aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it. I declare the amendment adopted. Further amendments to the bill?
No, sir.
If not, the bill will be engrossed and advanced to third reading.
Senate Bill 338, changing date for employers to file annual reconciliation and withholding statements. Second reading of the bill.
Are there amendments to the bill?
No, sir.
If not, the bill will be engrossed and advanced to third reading.
Senate Bill 393, relating to compensation and composition of West Virginia Racing Commission. Second reading of the bill.
Are there amendments to the bill?
No, sir.
If not, the bill will be engrossed and advanced to third reading. Further bills on second reading?
No, sir.
Bills on first reading. The senator from Ohio County.
Thank you, Mr. President. I request unanimous consent that all bills on first reading be considered as having been read and advanced to second reading.
Is there objection? Chair hears none, so ordered. Introduction of guest. Introduction of guest. Remarks by members of the Senate. The junior senator from the 8th.
Thank you, Mr. President. I ask unanimous consent to be able to address the members of the Senate.
Under remarks, the senator may proceed.
Thank you, Mr. President. Last year, my first year here as a state senator, I told a lot of you here on the Senate floor of my dad, what he meant to me and what he did for me and what he taught me. There was another individual in my life that when my father passed away in 1988 that took me under his wing, and that was my grandfather. Taught me a lot of things as I was maturing into an adult. And one thing that always inspired me was his ability to be able to tackle problems. He was a mechanic by trade, but he was also a certified licensed electrician, HVAC. He could do everything. And As I watched him and worked with him in numbers of places here in West Virginia, especially in Putnam County, one day I asked him, I said, "Papa," I always called him Papa. I said, how do you do this? I said, how did you learn all this? He said, Glenn, he said, if there's a will, there's a way that it can be done. So he could tackle problems, and it made me start thinking about our legislature, our state, the history of our state. So I went back and I started looking at some problems that happened within the state, and pulled out a couple of them that I wanted to talk about and to show what this legislative body did. Back in 2003, on January the 1st, we had 39 physicians that walked out of 4 hospitals in the northern panhandle. When that happened, they took extended leaves of absence to protest the rising cost of what? Medical malpractice insurance. It was a moment that shocked, some say, the nation, but it shocked the people of West Virginia, and it took action by the Governor Wise and the legislature. 8 days later, in his State of the State address, Governor Wise proposed reforms to our medical liability laws and helped with insurance premiums from tobacco settlements and funds. It was House Bill 2122 that was introduced on the 3rd day of the session. Then it was worked on for nearly 2 months by committees in both houses. Differing versions were passed and sent to conference. Both chambers passed the bill again on March the 8th. It was vetoed, corrected, passed again the same day, and then it was signed by the governor on the 11th day. Press accounts show that those months, they were long, difficult roads, stakeholders giving some and not being too happy about doing so. But in the end, all sides came together and hammered out the solutions that were needed to keep our doctors here in West Virginia. I look back and I can see which of our colleagues participated in that problem, and many of them are in here. Senator Trump was in the House at the time, sponsor of the governor's bill. President Carmichael, you, Senator Blair, Senator Beach, and Senator Palumbo were in the House. Senator Plymel served on the conference committee. Senator Prezioso was chair of Health. Senators Boley, Senator Unger were also a part of finding the solution. Where there is a will, there is a way. The next problem that was addressed by our legislature was the massive unfunded liability in the workers' compensation program, 2005. Governor Manchin made it the centerpiece of his agenda when he took office. For decades, industry and labor, medical providers, and those who receive benefits knew that the system, nearly 100 years old, was quickly heading toward insolvency. The fund to pay benefits was running out of money. Premiums for the state business were at some of the highest in the nation. And I can remember that when I went into business in 1997, what those premium costs were. And there were many reasons for the crisis, which I do not want to talk about today. But my point is, once again, the governor, the legislature, Democrats, Republicans, and all stakeholders in the system came together to find a solution. And once again, not everyone was happy, not by a long shot, but everybody worked towards solving the problem. And once again, where there is a will, there is a way. Mr. President, I believe today we have another crisis that is beginning here in the state. This time it does not directly affect just business or workers. Mr. President, I believe that this crisis is vital to our growth and the building of our future of all citizens that I believe is every bit important as those that I have discussed today. What concerns me today, this crisis that I believe that is brewing, it's about our compensation for our professional educators and our teachers and our school service personnel and our state workers. Each of us knows that West Virginia has, I believe, no chance to grow unless we have a stable, educated workforce. Mr. President, you were behind. You were out front with this community college, free technical and community college, which I think is a great idea. And you understand that we need an educated workforce. As an employer for a long time, the member of an economic development authority in my home county, Putnam, I can tell you that some of the first questions that come up is about an educated workforce, and then also about a drug-free workforce. You know, our teachers, we expect so much of them, yet we compensate them so poorly for the job that they do for our children. We expect them to join with parents, for many times to substitute for parents, to prepare our children for their futures. It's an awesome responsibility that we ask of them. I am certain that each of us personally knows teachers who have dipped into their pockets to pay for supplies for our students. We know teachers who work long hours even after school is done. What we never hear about, that they would never say, is our teachers that pay for school supplies, lunches, clothing for children who are less fortunate. A teacher may be the only smile a child may see that day, the only gentle hand, and maybe the only hug for that day. A teacher may provide only space in which a child feels safe, protected, and cared for. A teacher may provide a child with the only reason to stay off drugs. Our teachers fight for our children every day to make sure they are well, happy, and educated. Our teachers shouldn't have to fight for a salary that pays the bills, that gives them a decent, affordable health care and pension. We made a promise a long time ago, past legislature, even though it is put in the code, it would bring teacher salaries to our national average. Mr. President, we have fallen short of that because it was in 2019 when we should have had them up to the national average. And I know that we were to work toward that. According to Education Week, our teachers are the 6th worst paid in the country. In addition, they have cost a PEA that keeps escalating, amounting to a salary reduction for our hardworking teachers, school service personnel, and our state employees. Mr. President, what I have learned in history is that this body has always came together to fix problems. And Mr. President, I believe if there is a will within this body, we will find a way to be able to compensate our teachers, our school service personnel, and our state employees. Thank you, Mr. President.
Further remarks, the Senator from Marion County.
Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent that the comments from the junior senator from the 8th be printed in the appendix to the journal.
Is there objection? Chair hears none, so ordered. Further remarks? Further remarks? Miscellaneous business. The Senator from Ohio County.
Thank you, Mr. President. I request unanimous consent the remarks by the Senator from Jefferson regarding Senate Resolution 19 be printed in the appendix to the journal.
Is there objection? Chair hears none, so ordered. Senator from Ohio County.
Thank you, Mr. President. Subject to announcements, I move the Senate stand adjourned until tomorrow at 11 a.m.
Are there announcements? Are there announcements? The senior senator from the 15th.
Thank you, Mr. President. Your Senate Finance Full Committee will meet today for budget presentations from Senior Services, Department of Education and the Arts, and the reason the full committee, I've also have the agenda's been posted, and so there's bills on the agenda afterwards. We expect the 2 budget hearings to go relatively quickly, so that's the reason for going ahead and having the full committee there. Thank you.
The senator from Monroe County.
Thank you, Mr. President. Your Education Committee will meet tomorrow afternoon at 2 p.m. in the Senate Finance Room. The agenda should be posted just in a little bit.
Senator from Morgan County.
Thank you, Mr. President. Your Committee on the Judiciary will meet today at 3 o'clock p.m. in room 208 West Wing.
Senator from Preston County.
Thank you, Mr. President. Your Government Organization Subcommittee on Volunteer Fire Departments and Emergency Medical Services will meet 9 a.m. this Wednesday, 208 West.
Further remarks, the senator from Jefferson County.
The subcommittee on Senate Bill 83 will be meeting immediately after Judiciary at 3 o'clock in 208 West.
The senior senator from the 6th.
Thank you, Mr. President. Your Committee on Natural Resources will be meeting today at 1 p.m. in 208 West. The agenda has been posted.
The senator from Nicholas County.
Thank you, Mr. President. Your Committee on Transportation and Infrastructure will meet tomorrow morning at 10 a.m.
Further remark or further announcements? Further announcements? If not, the question before the Senate is, shall the Senate stand adjourned until tomorrow morning at 11 a.m.? All those in favor will say aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it. I declare the Senate adjourned until tomorrow at 11 a.m.